102.42283, which is a special incentive tag, and NEC file 430, which is the compensation panel. The only member that has to come through the CAB is if it's a CAB member in that third seat. So you've got a business member, an ag member, a sportsman, a hunting member, or the CAB. So if it's a CAB member filling that third seat, that has to come through the CAB. But if it's members coming from recommendations from other areas, doesn't have to come through the CAB.
Thank you. So we're okay.
Do we have any public comment on this, and I'll bring it back to the commission? Seeing no public comment?
I'll go ahead and make a motion then that we accept the recommended names from the White Pine CAB representative as presented, to that we voted on, as well as to mention agricultural, Mr. Moore, who currently is the only one that has any interest in it, and I think that we've met our obligation.
Second.
So we have a motion, and a second, any further discussion?
Just for
Yeah.
clarification, so Brian Bennett would serve as the local business representative, Mike Simons would be the sportsman representative, and Lance Moore would be the agriculture representative. I'm getting nods.
Yes. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Mr. Walters.
Yeah, just in clarification for Commissioner Rain's question, the way that NAC works is that claims that the local panel will be called to serve at the request of the director, and then the local panel is to render a decision within 20 days after receiving notification to serve on claim. So since we've been, claim has been filed with us, now we have a panel, so I'll contact that panel, and then presumably they'll have 20 days to render a decision.
Thank you.
All right. We're moving on to item 17, Commission Regulations CR 13-07, Amendment 1, 2014 Heritage Tag Vendors. Commissioner Walters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Excuse me. The Heritage Committee met in conjunction with the May Commission meeting and provided the following recommendations to the Commission for the 2014 Wildlife Heritage Tag. For the species of mule deer, a quota of 2 awarded to the Mule Deer Foundation and Wildlife and Habitat Improvement of Nevada. For pronghorn antelope, a quota of 2 awarded to Pershing County Truckers Unlimited and Nevada Waterfowl Association. For Rocky Mountain elk, a quota of 2 awarded to Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, Northern Nevada Safari Club International. And Nelson Bighorn sheep, quota of 2 awarded to the Wild Sheep Foundation National and Nevada Bighorns Unlimited. California Bighorn sheep, a quota of 1 awarded to Nevada Bighorns Unlimited. And wild turkey, there were a quota of 5, and they were awarded to Pershing County Truckers Unlimited, 2 to Northern Nevada Safari Club International, and 2 to WIN Wildlife and Habitat Improvement of Nevada.
Okay. Any commission comments or questions? Commissioner Ray.
Only problem with this, in my mind, is that we are still issuing too many specialty tags. With the advent of our other specialty tags, we now have far too many out there. The Silver State tags should have replaced a couple of these, and they have not in this case. So this is too many. We should only be given one of a couple of these instead of 2. And that's an issue. It's an issue of several fold. One, the main one is, call it public perception. We get these, call it elitist tags. These are, they should have been replaced with the Silver State. That is my fair and equitable method and more financially profitable method in almost every case than the heritage tags. So that's the issue with it, isn't that, the selection? Fine.
Any other commission comment? Commissioner McDowell?
Okay, so just for clarification, we're doing solar with the vendors on this, right?
Any other commission comment? Commissioner Lane?
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to agree with Mr. Rain on this. I do have an issue with the number of tags, and that's the only reason why I'm going to be voting no on this.
Any other commission comment? Any public comment? Mr. Bush, you're not gonna come up? Can I get you to come up?
You guys know.
Can I get you to come up? Because there's some question, and I think it may have a reflection on Ms. Lane's vote. You are the sole author and the person that carried the ball for the Silver State Tag for 6 years. Was it your intent that the Silver State Tag replace the Heritage Auction tags?
For the record, Chad Bliss. My initial intent was to provide a fair opportunity to individuals that cannot afford to buy these tags. As we started looking into that, and realizing that it could be a possibility to do it in certain ways, then the money side of it was brought up to me. I actually didn't even think about the money that it could generate. I was all about the fairness of and the opportunity to the sportsmen of the state of Nevada and other states that want to come here. So that was my intent. As it went along, I involved everybody I possibly could. Every cab, I called every single one of them, people on the street, and some people thought it should take the place of some of these tags. I always just kept an open mind on it, on all of that part. I never intended it to replace the tags. It was just another way that we could distribute tags. We can allow, I believe it's up to 15 tags out of that program, and it was just to give an alternate way to distribute those tags. My intention wasn't to take or, swap around, it was just to provide more opportunity.
Chad, is that 15 Silver State and Heritage combined, or
Yeah,
15 in the Heritage? So,
yeah, Commissioner, it's said that there can be 15 big game tags and 5 wild turkey tags, and it's just combined.
not
It's all
counting
parts.
turkeys, Grant just pointed that out.
And the Silver State Tag is a Heritage tag.
It's exactly equal to a heritage tag. It is same season dates, weapon choice.
Yeah, minus turkey tags, that makes a lot more sense.
Okay.
All right. Okay, thank you, Chad. Any other public comment? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission for a motion. Commissioner Wallace.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move to approve CR 13-07, 2014 Wildlife Heritage Tags, amendment number 1 as presented.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Nay.
7-2 with Lane and Rain in opposition. Okay, agenda item number 18, biannual upland game release plan for fiscal year 2014-2015. Sean?
Members of the commission, Sean Espinoza for the record, Upland Game Staff Specialist. Just to summarize the plan, we have, each year we conduct California quail releases, and these are at the request of some landowners in the Reno, Carson, and even sometimes Winnemucca area that complain of actually too many California quail in their yards. So proposed introductions of mountain quail and 3 proposed augmentations. 5 proposed introductions of Rio Grande turkey and 1 augmentation. 1 introduction proposed for rough grouse over the next biennium with 3 augmentations. And then, of course, our truck-tailed grouse project with successive augmentation of the existing population in the Gilmore Basin. And to summarize the accomplishments from the last biennium, we released 473 California quail in various locations, including Pershing, Humboldt, and even Elko County, as well as Lander. 97 mountain quail were released in the Buck Mountain area of White Pine County. 138 rough grouse were released across 4 different release sites. And then our Columbian Sharp-tailed grouse project was initiated just this year with the release of 49 individuals there. With that, I'll take questions about the release plans we have.
Commissioner Drew.
Yeah, not so much a question, but just a comment. Sean kind of quickly went over some of the accomplishments that they've had in the last year or two on this program, but I'd just like to acknowledge himself and the staff, because I know these guys have really done a good job at perfecting some of their trapping techniques and made some huge strides in efficiency. We look at the partner project for this for big game as one of the state's biggest success stories, and this may not be as highlighted as that program, but these guys are doing a really good job and doing some really good things. We're improving our population with wildlife and improving some of our opportunities. So just wanted to acknowledge his staff and everyone that's worked on these projects. They're doing a heck of a good job. So thank you for that.
Commissioner Beth.
Thank you. Sean, along with my newfound passion for being a turkey hunter, I am interested now in maybe some of the turkey issues and maybe doing some things down in Park County. So I don't have any specific comments with regard to this plan, but just a general question. Some of the armchair biologists down there that I've been talking to have indicated that the difference between Rio Grande turkeys and Marion turkeys with regard to where they should be released, and with the general comment being that Marion turkeys should be released in higher elevations where there's colder temperatures, and that the Rio Grandes are better suited for lower country and warmer climates. And so, could you just go and comment on that? Is there anything to that?
Yeah, no, that is correct. Murians are more suited to forest environments and do deal well with colder temperatures better. And I know Kurt's in the audience. I believe that the turkeys were released in the Silver Christian is probably more Murians than they are Rio Grande. So that may be a factor of why that population is doing fairly well up there. But Rio Grandes are more suited to riverine type valley bottom habitats with agriculture associated with that. So we do try and separate the 2 species when we can.
Okay, and the general comment was that there were turkey releases on Mount Charleston and Spring Mountain Range of Park County, but they were basically Rio Grandes as opposed to Murians, and apparently they didn't do too well. And I don't even know if there is any even a remnant population of turkeys on the Spring Mountain Range. But I think one of the things we would like to maybe start a discussion with the department is potentially identifying some areas on Mount Charleston for Murians as opposed to Rio Grandes. That is a higher mountain habitat. At least let's maybe consider it and talk about it. What is the best way? And I don't know if there's going to be other areas that they might be able to identify in the southern area that turkeys as well.
Yeah, and some things to consider there are working in close association with the Forest Service, the Spring Mountain Wilderness, that could limit our ability to release birds in a situation like that. So it's something that we would have to look at really closely.
Okay. So we'd have to, do they have a general rule not to any turkeys in wilderness areas because they're not indigenous? Is that the issue?
Correct. Correct.
Thanks.
Any other commission comments or questions? Any public comment? Seeing none, I'll bring it
biennial upland game release plan for fiscal years 2014 and 2015 as presented by the Department of Wildlife.
Have a motion second, any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion passed unanimous. Move on to agenda item number 19, Wildlife Damage Management Committee, Commissioner Macbeth and Chief Game Larry Gilbertson. And Chief Bradley. Macbeth?
Okay, okay, so let me, I'll give you a report of, our Wildlife Damage Management Committee meeting. We met on Thursday from 2 o'clock to 7:30 p.m. 5.5 hours, and we basically went over policy, the draft of policy 25, and it was, I think we probably spent 2 hours on the definition of predation management. That's how involved it was, and after we got through that piece of it, I think we started moving down the road, and we were able to get through the vast majority of the policy with some revisions were made, and we'll be going over those in the next section. The single biggest issue that we had was the department's proposal to, in effect, do away with old policy 25, the existing policy 25, and replace it with this new drafted policy 25. And that led to a lot of discussion of what the definition of predation management was. And what's interesting is that that discussion paralleled my individual discussions that I had with the department in putting this all together. And I had some major concerns with respect to just eliminating the old policy 25 without the commission and the committee having some serious discussions about it. And so the committee pretty much got hung up on that, and what we decided to do is not do anything to the existing policy 25, but recommend to the commission that we assign a new policy number to the new policy which deals with predation management, which in effect implements NRS 502253. And so that's what we have done, is we have come up with a draft policy that implements NRS 502253. And so we'll be going over that. We made some changes. We moved some things from the policy section into the procedure, the procedure creation of the plan, and we moved some things from the procedure section back up into the policy section. I think that where we are right now is that we have a pretty good first draft, but I want to make sure everybody understands that we're still going to be taking a good look at this, and the committee is still going to have an opportunity to make additional suggestions for changes and revisions. We're going to bring this back for a second reading at the August meeting, or advance of the August meeting. So with that, let me give an overview. Well, let me finish up. So we want to recommend that we issue a new policy number. We had an agenda item to change the name of the committee to predation management, or consider that. We decided not to, because what we're going to do is we're going to circle back and deal with old policy 20, with policy 25 as a separate project. We decided to basically not do anything with that at this time. Concentrate on getting this new policy implemented that deals with 582.253. And so the committee, again, will have the same name, Wildlife Damage Management Committee. And we do want to set and I will work with the chairman, we want to set an additional Wildlife Damage Management Committee meeting before the August 2nd meeting. So that was that's my report of everything that occurred on at the meeting. At this point, what I'd like to do is I want to give an overview of what Policy 25, how we put this together, and then I'll ask Pete to come up and do the reading.
Can we, I hate to interrupt you, but, there's been a lot of confusion about policy 25, and there's been a lot of politics come into play in the past 6 months with policy 25, duration 9. We had a legislative action 345 that passed both houses and made it together and passed. So it became very political, and then it became even more political because we had a veto on a bill that passed both houses. And there's some confusion in the discussion that I heard the other day at the committee level on the justification for the veto. And so just to get everybody in the audience, everybody on the commission, everybody on the committee up to speed onto the veto that was placed, Commissioner Drew has a copy of the veto letter, and I requested that he read that into the record today, so we have a firm grasp of what it is. It doesn't say he didn't like the way it was going. From my footnote version, it says he has faith in the process and the laws already established, and that the department and commission can handle this without 345. But if Commissioner Drew could read that letter, maybe we could bring some clarity to the discussion we're having before we have the full discussion. Commissioner Drew?
This is a letter from the Office of the Governor dated June 6, 2013, to Ross Miller, Secretary of State, regarding Assembly Bill 345 in the 77th Legislative Session. And it reads, Dear Secretary Miller, I am herewith forwarding to you for filing with the constitutional time limit and without my approval Assembly Bill 345, which is entitled An Act Relating to Wildlife, requiring that wildlife in the state be managed according to the best science available, revising provisions relating to the authorized use of certain money in the Wildlife Fund account in the State General Fund, requiring the Board of Wildlife Commissioners to establish policies for certain programs, activities, and research relating to predatory wildlife, and providing other matters properly related thereto. Assembly Bill 345 revises a legislative declaration regarding wildlife to require that wildlife in the state be managed according to the best science available. It also establishes a requirement that the Department of Wildlife spend at least 50% of certain monies, which would be the $3 fee, credited to the Wildlife Fund for purposes of management and control of injurious wildlife. Finally, the bill requires the Wildlife Commission to establish a policy specifying reporting requirements for predator control activities or research. Nevada Revised Statute 501.181 currently specifies that the Wildlife Commission shall establish policies for the protection, propagation, restoration, transplanting, introduction, and management of wildlife in the state, and further requires that they consider input from county advisory boards and the general public, as well as recommendations and scientific information provided by the Department of Wildlife. Moreover, the Department of Wildlife and the Wildlife Commission are currently revising their policies to include many of the reporting requirements for predator control management and research programs as specified in Assembly Bill 345. Finally, the Department of Wildlife and the Wildlife Commission have a long history of guiding and directing the expenditure of public dollars for the betterment of Nevada's wildlife. Specifying in statute a percentage of funds to be allocated towards predator control programs unnecessarily restricts the Wildlife Commission and could very well inhibit them from carrying out their duties as effectively as possible. Assembly Bill 345 is duplicative of the current process established and could inhibit the effective management and protection of Nevada's wildlife. Because of these concerns, I veto this bill and return it to you without my signature and without my approval.
So, that being said, we recognize that we are working on policy.
follow-up. I think one of the CAB minutes reflected that they had an individual or maybe several individuals that implied because 345 was vetoed, there was no need for the policy. And I would submit, just based on being in the legislature and hearing some of the discussions, that part of the reason that that veto came is because we were working on policy. As you heard in the letter, the governor felt that the regulation was duplicative because we were already working in that direction. So I think that may have been a mischaracterization. I just wanted to make that clear based on the letter, and I think that's part of the reason for reading that in, is just so we're all clear on exactly why that happened.
And just to follow up, the way that I took the letter was that, that AB 345 probably contains some good policy suggestions, and we were working along those lines in the draft of the policy. And, but with the exception of the 50% limit, which, as you'll see, we have removed all reference to that to give maximum flexibility. So I do believe that the policy takes into account the governor's wishes on AB 345. I don't think we're doing anything. We had pretty extensive discussion about that at the committee meeting. So I think we're proceeding okay.
Commissioner Drew?
And then the only other question I had is more procedural, and I think the committee's recommendation is to actually leave the existing policy 25 in place and come back with a new policy. So just given the way this is agendized, I'm wondering if it makes sense to table review of policy 25 indefinitely and give direction to the committee to come back with a brand new policy, whatever the number may be, for first reading in August. And I say that for a couple reasons. One, we don't have the new policy number agendized in terms of going that direction for a first reading. And two, I know the committee had some pretty substantial updates and changes, so I want to make sure that the CABs and everyone else are kind of on the same page before we jump into a first reading. Does that make sense?
It does. We've had some discussions about our timeline, and we felt that that if we went ahead and did the first reading this time and a second reading in August, we still had the cushion of the September meeting, which is going to occur fairly quickly after the August meeting, to deal with anything else. So I guess your suggestion would be okay, but it does, we feel that we have really a drop dead deadline to get the policy in place by the September meeting. And so, I guess we could do that, because one of the issues we're gonna have on a reading today is that when we made these changes, we didn't have track changes in place. And so we're gonna be reading it and trying to determine what are the changes, and so that's gonna be somewhat difficult. I have talked to our DAG, Kristen, and the way we were gonna go forward today, she felt comfortable we were gonna be okay, because what we were gonna do is walk through it, do a first reading paragraph by paragraph, and also have handouts of the policy as revised by the committee. And so I guess in the end, as long as the commission understands that I think it's imperative that we have this policy in place by the September meeting. The problem I see is that we have the plan and also held in advance right now, waiting to get a policy in place so it can direct the committee and the commission as to how to deal with the reporting of the old of the project. We're going to be wrapping up for this fiscal year, and the new projects that are going to be coming online, if any, continuous of old projects and that. And so I would like for us to discuss all of that in the context of deciding to move the reading, first reading until August.
And I understand and I appreciate that concern, but as far as the FY14 plan goes, I mean, it's already kind of been developed under whatever existing direction there is. And And so really going forward, I mean, regardless of whether we adopt the policy in August or September, it's really gonna be probably more pertinent to the FY15 plan, because 14's so far down the road. So in my mind, I'd rather take, the time to make sure everyone gets a chance to review it, is comfortable with the language, than rush it through for the sake of trying to catch FY14, which is already so far down the line. And I don't know, maybe the department has questions or comments, or maybe it doesn't impact them one way or the other. But in terms of when the policy would go into place.
Yeah, I think that, we're operating on the assumption that, we know the bulk of the projects that are gonna happen, like, Chief Gilbertson indicated the other day that most of our work occurs, during the winter, but I would agree with, Commissioner Macbeth's, statement that September would be a drop dead deadline for us to have something in place.
Commissioner Rain.
Thank you. Couple things on this, one of which is the policy, is the agenda states policy 25. We're no longer talking about 25, we're talking about some other policy. So therefore, we're not agendized to read this some other policy. So we're doing a reading of some policy that isn't.
Well, the way it was
Agendized.
agendized was for material that was sent out, it was still being called policy 25. So
No.
so the copy that you have today, you remove the 25, or we're just calling it revised policy 25. And then during that discussion, is a direction to go back and rename the new policy from issued today.
So that, it seems to me that, that we might be taking care of that issue as well, Scott. If we're gonna, if the rest of the commission is gonna wanna, push this to August as a first reading, then it's gonna be resolved.
And for those reasons, and some others that I'll go into, I tend towards the way Mr. Drew is bending, is it could be twisted one way or what other to signify the way she's mentioning it, or the other way. But anyways, other parts of that is part of this, good portions of this policy 25, as it was presented to us, have pieces in here, and I'm assuming they must have been changed. Was there a revised version that came out of the committee that eliminated big chunks of this? 'Cause I don't have that.
And I'll respond,
Yes, yes.
Commissioner Rain is raising a good point, and the problem is that this draft of the policy occurred after the legislature had approved AB 345, but before it went to the governor and the veto occurred. And so one of the major revisions that occurred was to clean up the authority section that refers to the AB 502253 as it was set forth in AB 345. And so we did make some substantial changes to that. And so that will come out when you do look at the new policy.
So therefore, for first reading, there are such substantial changes that it's not really a first reading, because I don't have it. And how could it be a first reading?
I discussed that with Dan, and we were gonna go over that on the screen. It will be, for the first time, everybody was gonna be seeing it at the same time, and under our rules, under the open meeting law requirements, I think it would have been okay. We would have passed out the revised policy. We have copies available of the revised policy, and so, from a legal standpoint on open meeting law, I think we'd still be okay if we wanted to do it. And so, we have that option, but at this point, I'm okay with whatever the commission decides. We had talked about September being our drop dead date, and we were hoping we'd have a little bit of cushion if we did a reading today and another reading in August, and if there was any additional changes that we needed, we'd at least have September. But now, with this, we'll probably be okay. I'm not worried. I think that we will get it done by September, but I just want to make sure everybody's okay that September we're gonna end up going to September, and I really do look at that as a drop dead date.
Commissioner Wallace.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, essentially, the way I look at it, I've looked at this, I'm right there with Scott on that. If there's huge changes in it and parts cut out, I would prefer to have a copy of it. I don't know if we can have a copy or
So my comment to that is that, we spent 5.5 hours, going over this paragraph by paragraph. One of the last paragraphs, which has to do with the reporting section, is another, pretty substantial change that nobody has seen because the department, actually just took a stab at it, within the last couple of days. And so, not even I have seen that section. We gave some direction to the department to come back with some additional reporting requirements with regard to all of the projects, but specifically with regard to control programs, that would occur, legal control programs. And so, for full disclosure, we also have that as a pretty substantial addition that not even the committee members have seen yet. And so, with that, maybe we should put this off. I'm warming up more and more to the suggestions.
Yeah, I think it would be a more constructive conversation if we have a more complete look at what we're actually going to be talking about.
And I do want to add that I really want to thank all of the committee members. We have three commissioners on the committee, myself and Commissioner Lane and Commissioner Wise, and as well as Chad Bliss, who is going to now be a commissioner going forward in August, and we have Tom Castanelli as well. So I think we made there were some really good suggestions, and we dealt with some issues. But I get a sense that the rest of the committee would probably feel more comfortable doing it as well, because there was a lot. This is a brand new policy, is really what the bottom line is, and there was a lot to digest, and it's new. Anytime you have something new, there's obviously some concern and some a little bit of resistance to change, but I think that we made some really good changes, and so what you'll see in August will actually be a much more final product, and we'll have a lot less to do when it comes back to the second meeting in September.
Commissioner Ring.
Continuing on, where I was at, and then there'll be a couple of these things will be questions. One question though is, what role did Wildlife Services have in the development of this policy? And the reason I ask it, so I hopefully get some kind of an answer, is that, they're the ones that are gonna be doing all the work, or the vast majority of the work, and the only ones legally authorized to do the vast, anything doing with corvids and much of the other work involved here, especially the aerial aspect of any predation management plan. And, they've got to live under it. They've got to be able to operate out. What has been their input into it at department level and committee level?
Okay, I'll go ahead and answer that. The policy did not, I don't know if the policy got actually distributed to Wildlife Services. I don't know if the department gave them a copy of it, but it obviously was a part of this meeting, public notice that went out. But we did have Joe Bennett from Wildlife Services at the committee meeting. He did indicate that the Wildlife Services had the policy and had reviewed it. And then we also, he was really the only one in the public, and we actually asked him, for comment, and if Wildlife Service had any, any issues with it. And I think that his response indicated, indicated that they were relatively happy with the process. And I do want to explain that the Policy 25, which you're going to see, is really made up of 4 separate policies. Each one of those policies deals with the 4 aspects of KRS 502-253, 1, A, B, C, and D. Only A are legal control programs. B are management activities. C is research, and D is education. So we have a policy that deals with all those, and as a contractor, Wildlife Services only is going to be involved. Well, obviously, they can be involved through the public process as anybody on any aspect of the policy, but the policy does recognize Wildlife Services as the primary contractor for legal control programs but not the exclusive. We did identify some issues where Wildlife Services may not be able to do a lethal control program, and so we wanted to have that as an option to go out to other contractors in areas where they can do it. Obviously, there are legal issues like with ravens and such. So, anyway, so I think that we got an indication of Wildlife Services was happy with what they're seeing, and obviously, maybe we should just make a formal submission of the draft policy 25 when we have it to Wildlife Services.
Yeah, and just as a point of clarification, I had a number of personal meetings with the state director for Wildlife Services, with Mark Jensen. We discussed this. He's been provided with a copy of it. And I suggested to him that we wait, see the direction provided by the commission and the committee, and that we would sit down and certainly make them a part of this process. That said, ultimately, the responsibility and the liability associated with the expenditures and the reporting requirements and the $3 fee fall solely on the Department of Wildlife. So we need to make sure that, we include them to the extent possible, and so their expertise can be involved, but ultimately it's our responsibility and our liability to see through the expenditure of the $3 fee.
And I want to point out for the commission and for the rest of the public that I'm not sure of the exact date, but roughly within the last year, the Department of Wildlife and Wildlife Services entered into a memorandum of understanding as to the various roles of the department and Wildlife Service vis-a-vis lethal control programs. And so I did get a copy of that, and maybe what we should do is part of our support materials in the August meeting is we'll get a copy of that. I'd like to get a copy of the governor's letter in the support, of the veto letter in the materials, as well as the Wildlife Services, Department of Wildlife MOU, and I think that'll be a pretty substantial bit of information that everybody can digest. But I believe the policy does take into account, in other words, does not step on anybody's toes with respect to the MOU.
Commissioner Raymond.
Suggestions for this when it comes out, and as far as reporting requirements, and hopefully to call it smooth over or make it easier for everybody, and that would be especially the Wildlife Services aspect of it, and as to put in there a portion that says Wildlife Services is to provide a summary of their activities, but also their biological conclusions, recognizing that these guys, Wildlife Services work for them, are not, call it your average trappers. They all have advanced degrees of some sort, or in many cases advanced degrees in wildlife biology, and are fully qualified and do on a regular basis reporting of biological conclusions. And those guys might very well have different conclusions. Maybe the same as the department, maybe they're not. And it's a valuable tool to the commission, the CAB, the public, to know what their conclusions are and have them written right down there. You go ahead and have that put as a piece of policy. We'd like to have their summary of activities and their biological conclusions based upon their expertise, whatever that may be. When I go out and wander around and talk to those guys, they have all the qualifications that any of the other biologists do. They have all the schooling. And they have more training in predation and what that does to the protected prey species. Perhaps the most of them people that work for the Department of Wildlife. Why not have them work for us? We're paying them, right? Get their conclusions, compare them. Don't like them? Hey, that's a judgment. Gives the commission something else to deal with. It'd be very simple to do. Paragraph, sentence. Can that hurt?
Commissioner McVeigh.
Okay. This was the paragraph that the committee has not seen. This is the reporting portion of the policy, and so we will take that comment into account. I have not looked at this, the revisions that have occurred to this But rest assured that we have a requirement for contractors and grantees of any of the programs, but specifically control program, the one that you're interested in, that we are going to get a report from them with regard to how the project was carried out and the results of the project. So Wildlife Services, along with every other contractor and grantee of any of the programs that we put together through the plan, will have an opportunity to set forth their results and their position on the benefits. Because one of the things that the reporting is going to require them to do is, in the beginning, in the planning of the project, was what are your goals? And so they are going to have to basically report on whether they met their goals. And so that'll be their opportunity to do that. That report will then come to the committee, the Predation Management Committee, as well as to the commission in the December meeting. And so there'll be more than enough opportunity for everybody to have input. Wildlife Services will be able to report, and everybody else will get to look at that report and comment on that report. All members of the public, NGOs, CABs, and as well as the commission will eventually get it and review it.
As long as it doesn't limit them and what they can say and encourages them to say everything they've got, because it's when we could, further on the same
Mr.
issue.
Chair, I think we're getting a little hard feeling. Either we're should read the policy or it should be tabled, but now we're getting
Let's-
into what should
the
be
meat
in
of the policy.
What's that?
Into the meat of the policy and what should be included in it, right?
Well, if we're not gonna read.
We're not talking about policy 25 now, we're talking about the policy that doesn't exist.
Yeah, those policy.
Commissioner Drew.
Well, along those lines, I mean, I have a motion ready to make, but I want to hear, public comment if there is any on kind of our approach, and I think everyone kind of knows where I'm going, but essentially what I'm thinking of doing is tabling the reading of policy 25 indefinitely, and then directing the committee to continue work on this new policy that would be specific to the $3 fee and predation management. So that's kind of where I'm leaning towards, but I want to get it out to public comment to make sure, we're not leaving off some inputs there.
Commissioner Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before we take up the public comment, I'd like to kind of relate my take on what happened at the committee meeting. And as the discussion started at the beginning on the definition, I think it became apparent in my mind anyway that we were talking about an entirely new policy. And we still had the policy number attached, and I think it still is attached. I have not. Okay. See, I have not seen
Yeah, this has no.
this copy, and so I would have to agree with Commissioner Drew's first statement that we haven't even, the committee members haven't even had exposure to it, and due to time constraints, we did not, really on the tail end of that, we didn't really get a chance to see the language that was gonna be presented. But two things that I think came out of the committee's decisions were that the new policy needed to have a separate policy number, be treated as a separate policy, and retention of the old policy 25.
And the only update to that, and knowing that there's things in policy 25 that don't apply because rules have changed, laws have changed since policy 25 was enacted. So we still do need to revise policy 25, even though you want to keep it, there are revisions that are going to be required because it is not up to date.
Correct. And also to add to that, as far as that relates, the old policy 25 is the one that we are operating under right now. And so as far as looking at that as hindering the new plan that we have coming up in August, we've been operating under that old policy anyway.
All right, any other commission comments? Seeing none, I'll take it out to public comment. Come on up, Mr. Dixon.
record, public